There are very few surprises left when you're 61 years old, own half of the event planning market in Los Angeles, and are worth $80 million. But finding a box of Plan B one-step emergency contraceptive in my husband's glove compartment? That qualifies. I sat frozen in the driver's seat of Chad's ridiculous matte black Mercedes-AMG G63, staring at the pink box as if it were a radioactive isotope. My husband is 50. I am 61. I haven't ovulated since the second Bush administration. So unless my uterus is planning a biblical comeback tour, or the Holy Spirit is making a sequel, this pill, and the secret life attached to it, certainly isn't mine. The traffic light on Sunset Boulevard turned green. A Tesla behind me honked. I didn't move. I was too busy calculating the trajectory of my husband's impending doom. Just 10 minutes ago, my morning had been perfect. I was dressed in a vintage Chanel blazer, ready to terrorize the city council into approving the noise permits for the Getty Center Gala. But my Jaguar E-Type, a temperamental beauty I named the Duchess, refused to start. That forced me to take Chad's car. Chad called this monstrosity the Beast. I called it the compensation. He bought it last month for his 50th birthday, claiming he needed a vehicle that matched his rugged alpha energy. The only thing rugged about Chad is his struggle to open a jar of organic pickles. I looked at the receipt tucked inside the pharmacy bag. CVS on Ventura Boulevard, 11:42 p.m. Last night. My grip on the steering wheel tightened. Last night, Chad told me he was at a silent Vipassana retreat in Ojai to cleanse his chakras for his new life coaching program. Apparently, his chakras took a detour to a drugstore in the valley to fix a mistake with a woman who was clearly fertile enough to need Plan B. The sheer audacity was almost impressive. He left the evidence in the glove box. In the car he knew I had a spare key for. It wasn't just betrayal, it was an insult to my intelligence. It was sloppy, it was amateur. It was so, Chad. For a brief second, I felt a sting behind my eyes. It was the ghost of the love I had for him. The man I had pampered. The man I defended when my friends called him a trophy husband. I realized I hadn't just married a younger man. I had married a child who broke his toys and expected mommy to clean up the mess. But I don't clean up messes anymore. I organize them. I execute them. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. My eyeliner was still sharp, my lipstick was still a perfect shade of crimson. You know what, Chad? I whispered to the empty cologne-drenched cabin. You have a Plan B. That's adorable. I shoved the box back into the glove compartment, exactly where I found it. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't call his phone to demand an explanation. That's what a victim does. I am not a victim. I am the CEO of Vance Events. I shifted the G-Wagon into drive. The engine roared with an aggressive growl that suddenly sounded less like a midlife crisis and more like a declaration of war. Bad news for you, darling, I smiled, a cold, predatory smile that usually preceded a hostile takeover. I have a Plan A, and my plan involves lawyers, forensic accountants, and your total annihilation. I merged into the traffic, heading toward my meeting. The city council was about to have a bad day. But Chad was about to have a very bad life. I arrived at the Vance Events headquarters in Century City, walking past the wall of glass that overlooked the Los Angeles skyline. My assistant, a terrifyingly efficient young man named Paolo, handed me a double espresso and a tablet. Your mother is on line 1, Paolo whispered, looking concerned. She says it's an emergency involving a shortage of olives. I sighed and tapped my Bluetooth earpiece. Mother, it is 10 a.m. Please tell me you are not drinking martinis. It's 5 p.m. in Paris, Victoria. Don't be provincial, Bernice's voice crackled through. My mother is 75, a former B-list actress who once slapped Frank Sinatra in a nightclub, allegedly, and has refused to age gracefully ever since. Besides, I need them for my arthritis. Gin is medicinal. I need you sober, I said, closing the door to my office and engaging the privacy glass. I found a Plan B pill in Chad's car. There was a silence on the other end, followed by the distinct sound of ice clinking against crystal. Well, Bernice drawled, her voice dropping an octave. I assume you didn't take it. That ship sailed before the iPhone was invented. It's Chad. He's cheating. Finally, Bernice said. I never liked him. He has weak chins, both of them. I need you to help me. I can't use my usual security team. They're all on the payroll for the gala, and Chad has access to the expense reports. I need an independent contractor, someone invisible. Say no more, Bernice declared. I have a disguise, and I have the golf cart. Later that evening, the performance began. I was sitting in the living room of our Beverly Hills estate, reviewing the gala seating chart on my MacBook Pro M3, when Chad breezed in. He was wearing linen pants and a loose tunic that looked like he'd stolen it from a cult leader. Namaste, my queen, he exclaimed, leaning in to kiss my cheek. He smelled like a mixture of sweat, desperation, and Chanel Coco Mademoiselle. I didn't flinch. I smiled the smile I reserve for clients who ask for discounts. Welcome back, darling. How was the silent retreat? Did you find your inner alpha? Oh, it was transformative, Vic, Chad said, throwing himself onto the Italian leather sofa. We did a lot of primal screaming, released so much trauma, I feel lighter. You smell interesting, I noted, taking a sip of my sparkling water. Floral, almost like a 20-something-year-old girl who doesn't know how to apply perfume in moderation. Chad froze for a microsecond. His eyes darted to the left, a classic tell. Oh, that's the essential oils. We used ylang ylang for the root chakra, very potent. Right, I said. Root chakra, of course. While Chad went to shower off his spirituality, I opened his iPad. He thought he was clever with his passcodes. Alpha Chad 1974. But he wasn't clever enough to disable the cloud syncing between his devices. I didn't look for texts. Texts can be deleted. I looked at the finances. Men like Chad are sloppy with money because they've never had to earn it. I scrolled through the joint American Express statement. Sephora, $350. Chad doesn't wear makeup, though perhaps he should. Earth Cafe, $45. 2 matcha lattes and a vegan brownie. Lululemon, $120. Women's leggings, size small. And then the pièce de résistance, a recurring monthly payment for a storage unit in Silver Lake. Silver Lake, I muttered to myself. The hipster capital of LA, of course. That's where you stash a mistress who thinks oat milk is a personality trait. My phone buzzed, a text from Bernice. It was a blurry photo taken from what looked like a bush. It showed Chad's G-Wagon parked outside a small, trendy apartment complex with a neon sign that said, "Good vibes only." Bernice's text followed. The eagle has landed. And by eagle, I mean the turkey. He's going in. Also, I ran over a traffic cone. Send bail money just in case. I looked upstairs towards the master bathroom, listening to Chad singing Coldplay in the shower. He thought he was safe. He thought he was smart. I closed my MacBook with a satisfying snap. The game was afoot. And unfortunately for Chad, I wasn't just playing to win. I was playing to bankrupt. If there is a circle of hell reserved for people who think oat milk is a personality trait and beanie hats are appropriate in 90-degree weather, it is Silver Lake. I parked my rental car, a nondescript Toyota Camry that smelled faintly of pine air freshener and mediocrity, down the street from the Good Vibes Only apartment complex. I couldn't risk taking the Jaguar or the G-Wagon. In this neighborhood, a car like that would either be keyed or turned into an ironic art installation. I adjusted my disguise in the rearview mirror. I was wearing an oversized etro caftan, a silk scarf wrapped around my head like a fortune teller, and pair of Ray-Ban aviators so large they covered half my zip code. I looked like a wealthy eccentric who had lost her way to Coachella. Perfect. Target is on the move, Bernice's voice crackled in my earpiece. She was parked 2 blocks away in her golf cart. How she got it here from Beverly Hills, I didn't ask, acting as my lookout. They are walking into the matcha monk. God, they walk slow. It's like watching 2 sloths mate. I exited the car and followed them, keeping a safe distance. Chad was wearing skinny jeans that cut off his circulation and a vintage t-shirt that said Nirvana. I would bet my entire stock portfolio he couldn't name a single song by them other than the one that smells like Teen Spirit. And then, there was her, Tiffany. She was exactly what I expected and everything I feared. Young, painfully young. She wore a crochet crop top and enough body glitter to signal a rescue plane. She was holding an iPhone 15 Pro Max on a gimbal, filming herself walking. Hey guys, vibe check. I heard her chirp at the screen. Just grabbing matcha with my soul tie. I suppressed the urge to vomit and slipped into the cafe behind them. They took a table near the window. I grabbed a seat behind a large potted fiddle leaf fig tree, turning my back to them. I'll have the deconstructed turmeric latte with almond milk. Hot but not too hot, Chad ordered. Even his coffee order was high maintenance. I pulled out my phone and pretended to read, but my ears were tuned to their frequency. "Babe, you seem stressed," Tiffany said. Her voice had that vocal fry that made her sound like she was permanently running out of battery. "Is it the dragon lady again?" "Dragon lady. Cute." "It's Victoria," Chad sighed, the sound of a martyr carrying the weight of the world. "She just doesn't get it, Tiff. She's so material. She thinks money is the answer to everything. I feel suffocated in that mansion. It's a golden cage." I gripped my menu. Suffocated? The man had a heated towel rack and a personal sauna. If that was a cage, sign me up for prison. "That is such toxic Capricorn energy," Tiffany nodded sagely. "You need to protect your peace. Have you manifested the abundance yet?" "I'm trying," Chad lowered his voice. "But she's watching the accounts like a hawk. I need a little more time to transfer the energy. And by energy, I mean the liquidity from the joint trust." "Well, you better hurry," Tiffany giggled, popping a piece of vegan banana bread into her mouth. "Because that pill made me feel super weird. I don't want to do that again. Next time, let's just trust the universe, okay? If a baby comes, it's destiny." My blood ran cold. Trust the universe? The universe doesn't pay for private school tuition or orthodontics. I do? "We can't risk it yet, babe," Chad said, reaching for her hand. "Not until I secure the seed money for my startup. Once I get that check from her for the anniversary, we are free." "You're so smart, Chad," Tiffany cooed. Then she paused, tilting her head like a confused puppy. "But hey, are you sure she's not your mom? Because in that picture you showed me, she looks really preserved, like a museum exhibit." I froze. The audacity, the sheer, unadulterated disrespect. Chad laughed. He actually laughed. "She's old school, Tiff. Ancient history. You're the future." I stood up. I didn't mean to. It was a reflex, like a knee jerking when hit with a hammer. I wanted to turn around, rip off my scarf, and eviscerate them both with a monologue that would make Shakespeare cry. But I stopped. No, that would be messy. That would be emotional. That would be exactly what a crazy old woman would do. I sat back down, taking a deep breath. My heart was pounding, not from fear, but from adrenaline. Chad wanted seed money for his startup? He wanted to manifest abundance? I smiled behind my scarf. I picked up my phone and texted my lawyer. "Draft the paperwork for a business investment, shell company. Make it look legit. I'm about to make Chad's dreams come true, and then I'm going to turn them into a nightmare." I waited for them to leave first. As Chad held the door open for Tiffany, I saw him check out her backside. He looked smug. He looked like a man who thought he had won the lottery. "Enjoy your latte, Chad," I whispered into my collar. "It's the last expensive thing you'll be drinking for a very long time." I sat in the library of our home, a room smelling of old leather and furniture polish. In front of me, on the mahogany desk, sat my Mont Blanc Meisterstück fountain pen and a pristine checkbook from the private banking division of J.P. Morgan. "Enter," I said, when a timid knock echoed on the heavy oak door. Chad walked in. He looked like a puppy who had just chewed a slipper but was hoping for a treat anyway. He was holding a glass of green sludge, his dinner, presumably. "You wanted to see me, Vic?" he asked, sitting on the edge of the Chesterfield armchair. "I've been thinking, Chad," I began, spinning the pen between my fingers. "About what you said, about feeling stifled." Chad's eyes widened. He set down his green sludge on a coaster. "Thank God, or I would have ended him right there." "You have?" "Yes, and I realized I haven't been supportive of your vision. You have so much alpha energy, it needs a release." I almost choked on the words, but my face remained a mask of benevolent grace. "Tell me again about your business idea, the water thing." Chad lit up like a Christmas tree in Rockefeller Center. He jumped up and began pacing, using his hands to make sweeping, nonsensical gestures. "Okay, so it's not just water, Vic. It's hydrovibrational wellness," he explained breathlessly. "We harvest ice from glaciers that have never been touched by human depression. Then we play sound baths to the water, 5 and 28 hertz, the frequency of love, before bottling it in biodegradable glass made from hemp." I blinked. "You're selling water that has been listened to?" "It has memory, Vic. It remembers it was ice," Chad exclaimed. "I call it aqua ego." It was the stupidest thing I had ever heard in my 61 years on this planet. It was a Ponzi scheme for thirsty idiots. It was perfect. It's brilliant, I lied. It's revolutionary. I opened the checkbook. The sound of the paper tearing was crisp and loud in the silent room. I want to be your angel investor, Chad, I said softy. For our anniversary. I wrote the date, I wrote his name, and then I wrote the number. 50000. $500,000, I said, sliding the check across the desk. Chad stared at it. His mouth hung open. I could practically see the gears turning in his head. He wasn't seeing startup capital, he was seeing a divorce settlement, a penthouse for Tiffany, and a lifetime supply of hair gel. Vic, I don't know what to say, he stammered, reaching for the check with trembling fingers. Don't say anything, I said, placing my hand over his to stop him. Just sign this. I produced a document from the drawer. It was thick, stapled, and dense with legal jargon. What is it? He asked, his eyes still glued to the check. Standard procedure, darling. Just a formal agreement stating that this is a business loan, not a marital gift. It protects the company tax-wise. You know how the IRS is. It was a lie. The document was a masterclass in entrapment, drafted by my lawyer. It stated that if the funds were used for anything other than business expenses, like, say, rent for a mistress or jewelry, the borrower, Chad, would forfeit all marital assets and assume full liability for fraud. Oh, sure. Taxes. Boring, Chad laughed nervously. He grabbed my Mont Blanc pen and scribbled his signature on the dotted line without reading a single word. He didn't care about the fine print. He only cared about the zeros. He grabbed the check and kissed it. Then he ran around the desk and hugged me. You won't regret this, Vic. I'm going to make us so rich, he shouted. I let him hug me. I felt his heart beating against my chest. Once that rhythm had comforted me. Now it just felt like a ticking time bomb. I know you will, Chad, I whispered, patting his back. Go on. Go celebrate. Go manifest your destiny. He practically sprinted out of the room, clutching the check like a golden ticket. I heard him whooping in the hallway, followed by the sound of him dialing a number on his phone. Tiffany. He was calling Tiffany. I sat back down in my chair and picked up my glass of Pinot Noir. I looked at the signed contract on my desk. You didn't read the contract, Chad, I said to the empty room, taking a slow, savory sip of wine. Rule number 1 of business. Always read the fine print. He thought I had just given him the keys to the kingdom. In reality, I had just handed him a shovel, and he had enthusiastically started digging his own grave. The Vance estate had been transformed into a scene straight out of The Great Gatsby, if Gatsby had been a 61-year-old woman with a vendetta and a penchant for Dom Perignon. I stood at the top of the grand staircase, wearing a gunmetal gray Oscar de la Renta gown that cost more than Chad's first 3 cars combined. Beside me, my mother Bernice was dressed in purple sequins, holding a martini glass with a dangerous glint in her eye. He looks like a waiter on a cruise ship, Bernice observed, pointing her cane at Chad down below. Chad was wearing a white dinner jacket from Tom Ford. He was currently pacing near the ice sculpture, which was carved in the shape of a water droplet naturally, checking his phone every 3 seconds. Showtime, I whispered. I descended the stairs, the crowd parting for me like the Red Sea. I made my way straight to Chad, who jumped as if I had tased him. Victoria, you look intimidatingly beautiful, he stammered, shoving his phone into his pocket. Relax, darling. I smoothed his lapel. Tonight is about you, about Aqua Ego, and speaking of which, I have a surprise. I signaled to the entrance. The heavy double doors opened and in walked Tiffany. She was wearing a neon pink dress that was less of a garment and more of a suggestion. It had cutouts in places where cutouts shouldn't exist. She looked around the room, spotted the chocolate fountain, and squealed. Chad turned pale. Vic, why is she here? She's your brand ambassador, isn't she? I beamed innocently. I invited her. We can't launch a youth-focused water brand without youth, can we? I grabbed Chad's arm, my grip firm as a vice, and marched him over to her. Tiffany, I called out. Tiffany turned, her mouth full of chocolate-covered strawberry. Hi, Mrs. Vance. This house is huge. It gives total Bridgerton vibes, but like, with electricity. Thank you, dear. I said. You know Chad, of course. The comedy of the moment was exquisite. Chad looked like he wanted to dissolve into the floor. Tiffany looked at Chad, winked conspicuously, and said, Hi, Mr. Miller. Nice tux, very James. Hello, Tiffany, Chad squeaked. His voice cracked. Good to see you. I was just telling Chad how excited we are about the launch, I said, positioning myself between them so I could see both their faces. Tiffany, tell everyone about the vision. Tiffany cleared her throat. Yeah, so water is super important? Because we are 70% water, or maybe 80. Anyway, Chad says this water has good vibes downloaded into it, which is sick. A nearby group of investors from Goldman Sachs stared at her in polite horror. She's a genius, I told them, deadpan. Suddenly, Bernice appeared out of nowhere, driving her motorized wheelchair. She didn't need it, she just liked the drama of being seated while everyone stood. She stopped right in front of Tiffany. Excuse me, child, Bernice barked, adjusting her monocle. Are you the entertainment? The magician's assistant? Or did you just get lost on your way to a pole dancing competition? Tiffany blinked, confused. No, I'm the brand ambassador. Ambassador? Bernice scoffed. The only thing you represent is a shortage of fabric. Bernice then accidentally hit the joystick on her wheelchair, lurching forward and bumping into a waiter carrying a tray of red wine. The tray tipped. Gravity did the rest. Splash! 3 glasses of Cabernet Sauvignon landed squarely on Chad's pristine white Tom Ford jacket. Oh no, I gasped, covering my mouth to hide my smile. The chaos of the universe. It must be bad feng shui, Chad. Chad stood there, dripping red wine like a crime scene victim. Tiffany screamed and started dabbing him with a cocktail napkin, which only smeared it further. I need to change, Chad yelled, his composure shattering. I can't give my speech looking like this. Go upstairs, darling, I soothed him. Take your time, I'll entertain the guests. As Chad sprinted up the stairs, looking like a bloodied marshmallows, I turned to the DJ. Maestro, I commanded. Turn the music down, it's time for the presentation. I walked to the stage. The giant screen behind me was set up for Chad's PowerPoint presentation on Aqua Ego. But Chad wasn't here. And I had made a few edits to his slides. I took the microphone. The room went silent. Ladies and gentlemen, I began, my voice steady and commanding. My husband wanted to talk to you tonight about transparency, about purity, about the truth. I clicked the remote. The screen flickered to life. So let's look at the truth. The ballroom of the Vance estate was silent, save for the hum of the high-end Sony 4K laser projector. 200 of Los Angeles's wealthiest socialites, tech investors, and plastic surgeons turned their eyes to the massive screen. I stood at the podium, gripping the clicker. When evaluating a startup, I said, my voice projecting clearly through the Sennheiser sound system, one must look at the overhead costs. And my husband Chadwick has been incurring some significant hidden expenses. I pressed the button. Slide 1. A high-resolution photo of the Plan B one-step box sitting on the leather seat of the G-Wagon. Caption, Risk Management Strategy. Failed. A ripple of confusion went through the crowd. Someone gasped. I saw Mrs. Vander Woodson adjust her spectacles. As you can see, I narrated, keeping a straight face, the initial investment in recreational activities led to an unexpected need for crisis control. This was purchased at 11:42 p.m. While I was reviewing contracts, my husband was apparently reviewing his reproductive options. Tiffany, standing near the chocolate fountain, squinted at the screen. Wait, she whispered loudly. Is that my box? Is this like a mood board? I clicked again. Slide 2, a screenshot of Chad's text messages to Tiffany. Hey Baba, you up? The dragon lady is asleep, miss her energy. Lol or funny, can you buy me that bag? The Gucci one? Done, put it on the MX. Manifesting it. Laughter began to bubble up from the back of the room. It wasn't polite laughter. It was the raucous, shocked laughter of people witnessing a train wreck. Here we have the communications department, I continued, pacing the stage like Steve Jobs unveiling the first iPhone. Notice the syntax. Dragon lady. A classic archetype. And notice the financial allocation. A Gucci Marmont bag, charged to the charity account. I suppose Tiffany is a non-profit organization? She certainly accepts a lot of donations. Bernice was in the front row, holding her iPhone up, live streaming the entire thing to Facebook. Get his spelling errors, Victoria, she shouted. Zoom in on buy. I clicked to the final slide. Slide 3, a split screen. On the left, a graph showing Chad's spending crashing downward. On the right, a live video feed from the security camera I had installed in the Silver Lake storage unit. It showed stacks of cash, fake passports, and boxes of Aqua Ego water bottles gathering dust. And finally, the exit strategy, I announced. Chadwick intended to take your investment money, $500,000, and funnel it into this storage unit before fleeing to Tulum with his brand ambassador. At that exact moment, the double doors burst open. Chad ran in. He had changed into a spare black tuxedo jacket that was 2 sizes too small, making him look like a penguin who had been hitting the gym too hard. "Victoria, I'm ready," he shouted, straightening his bow tie. "Let's sell some water." He stopped. He saw the screen. He saw the text messages. He saw the Plan B box. He looked at the audience. 200 people were staring at him with a mix of pity and amusement. The silence was deafening. "Vic?" Chad's voice was a squeak. "What is this?" "It's your performance review, Chad," I said, my voice cold as ice. "And I'm afraid you didn't meet your KPIs." Tiffany, realizing the vibe had shifted from party to public execution, tried to slink away. But Bernice blocked her path with the wheelchair. "Sit down, Tinkerbell," Bernice growled. "We haven't got to the Q&A session yet." I looked down at Chad from the stage. He looked small. He looked old. The alpha energy had evaporated, leaving behind a terrified middle-aged man in a tight jacket. "You wanted to be a businessman, Chad," I said into the microphone. "Well, in business, when an asset becomes a liability, you liquidate it." I dropped the microphone. It hit the floor with a heavy thud that echoed through the room. The crowd erupted, not in applause, but in the frantic murmur of gossip that would destroy Chad's reputation before sunrise. I walked off the stage, past my stunned husband. "You're fired," I whispered as I passed him. The last of the guests had departed, their Bentleys and Rolls-Royces disappearing down the driveway, carrying with them the fresh gossip that would nourish Los Angeles for weeks. The foyer was quiet. The only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock and Chad's heavy breathing. He stood by the door, still wearing the wine-stained tuxedo jacket that was too small for him. "Victoria, wait," Chad pleaded, holding his hands up in a gesture of surrender. That presentation, it was a bit harsh, don't you think? It was just a momentary lapse of judgment, a midlife stumble. "A stumble is tripping over a rug, Chad," I said, leaning against the marble console table. "Sleeping with a girl who thinks the moon is a planet is a choice." "But the community property laws," Chad's eyes darted around the room. "We live in California. Half of this house is mine. Half of that company is mine. You can't just fire me." "Actually," a deep baritone voice echoed from the library. "She can." And she did. Arthur Sterling stepped into the light. Arthur was my corporate attorney, my fiercest ally, and the man I almost married 30 years ago before I decided I loved my career more. He was 62, wore a bespoke Savile Row suit, and aged like a fine Macallan 25. "Hello, Arthur," Chad gulped. He hated Arthur, mostly because Arthur was everything Chad wasn't: successful, intelligent, and employed. "Chadwick?" Arthur nodded, opening a leather folder. "Regarding your claims to the estate, do you recall the document you signed yesterday? The one for the angel investment?" "Yeah, the loan for Aqua Ego," Chad said. "So what?" Arthur smiled. It was a shark's smile. "That wasn't a loan agreement, Chad. That was a post-nuptial amendment. Clause 14, Section B. In exchange for the liquidity injection of $500,000, Mr. Miller agrees to waive all rights to marital assets, effectively immediately should any evidence of infidelity or embezzlement surface." Chad's face went white. I didn't read it. I just signed it." "We know," I said, sipping a glass of water, tap water, not Aqua Ego. "You never read, Chad, you just manifest." Tiffany, who had been checking her Instagram notifications in the corner, looked up. "Wait, so does this mean he doesn't have the money for the startup?" "It means," Arthur clarified, "that he doesn't have money for a sandwich." Tiffany gasped. She looked at Chad, then at me, then at the door. The calculation in her eyes was faster than a supercomputer. "Okay, well," Tiffany said, smoothing her dress, "this has been super educational, but I think my Uber is here. Chad, lose my number. You have like really bad root chakra energy now." "Tiffany, wait," Chad cried out as she breezed out the front door without looking back. "Now, for the logistics," I said, checking my nails. "The G-Wagon is registered to Vance Events. The keys, please." "You can't take the beast," Chad whined. "It's my identity." "It's a company asset," Arthur corrected. "Hand them over." Reluctantly, Chad fished the keys out of his pocket and slammed them onto the table. "And the Rolex Submariner," I added. Gifted on the condition of fidelity. Read the card I gave you last Christmas. It's legally binding. Chad unclasped the watch, tears welling in his eyes. He was being stripped of his costume piece by piece. You have 10 minutes to pack a bag, I said, looking at him with pity. Arthur has been kind enough to call you a taxi. It's a Toyota Prius. It should be very grounding for you. Where am I supposed to go? Chad shouted, his voice cracking. I have nowhere. I believe your mother has a futon in her basement in Reseda, I suggested. You can start your water empire from there. Maybe sell it from a garden hose? Not. Chad glared at me. You're a monster, Victoria. No, darling, I smiled, signaling for the security guards to step forward. I'm a businesswoman, and this merger is terminated. 10 minutes later, I stood on the balcony with Arthur and Bernice. We watched as Chad threw a Nike duffel bag into the back of a yellow taxi. He looked up at the house one last time, a fallen king who realized he never actually wore a crown. He was just wearing a party hat I bought for him. Pathetic, Bernice muttered, taking a bite of a canapé she had saved in her pocket. He didn't even fight for the dog. We don't have a dog, Mother, I reminded her. I know, but he should have asked. As the taxi faded into the night, Arthur turned to me. You okay, Vic? I took a deep breath of the cool night air. For the first time in 15 years, the air didn't smell of Santal 33 and lies. It smelled of jasmine and freedom. I'm $80 million richer and 180 pounds lighter, I said, clinking my glass against his. I've never been better. But as I turned to go back inside, I felt a slight pang in my chest. The house was big, and it was very, very quiet. Revenge, they say, is a dish best served cold. But in the age of social media, revenge is a dish best served viral, with a side of humiliating comments and a trending hashtag. 3 days after the Gala of Fools, I sat on my terrace wrapped in an Hermes Avalon blanket, sipping Mariage Frere's tea. Beside me, Bernice was cackling over her iPad like a witch who had just successfully cursed a village. Look at this one, Victoria, Bernice wheezed, wiping a tear from her eye. Someone made a remix of Chad saying, "Let's sell some water," set to circus music. It has 2 million views on TikTok. The hashtag Aqua Ego is trending higher than the Kardashians. I looked at the screen. There was Chad, his face smeared with red wine, looking panicked. The internet had done its work. The memes were brutal. One comment read, "This man didn't just drop the ball, he dropped the mic, the bag, and his dignity." He's famous, I noted dryly, just not in the way he manifested. Meanwhile, 20 miles away in the sun-bleached purgatory of Reseda, Chad was experiencing a very different kind of mourning. According to the private investigator I had kept on retainer, just for my own amusement, Chad was currently living in his mother's basement. The alpha male who demanded a G-Wagon was now sleeping on a lumpy futon, surrounded by his mother's collection of porcelain dolls. I clicked on a link Bernice sent me. It was a live stream Chad had started 10 minutes ago. The video was grainy. Chad was sitting in the backyard wearing a faded tank top. He looked tired. "Hey guys," Chad said to the camera, his voice shaking with forced positivity. "I know things look tough right now, but a true warrior uses the stones thrown at him to build a castle. I am pivoting. I am rising. I am starting a new journey with NutriLife, selling premium essential oils that cure skepticism." He held up a small brown bottle. "This is peppermint. It helps with, poverty." Suddenly, a high-pitched barking erupted in the background. "Quiet, killer," Chad yelled off-screen. A tiny, demonic chihuahua, presumably the neighbor's dog, burst into the frame. It latched onto the hem of Chad's cargo shorts and began to growl viciously. "Get off! Get off me!" Chad shrieked, spinning in circles, the bottle of essential oil flying out of his hand and shattering on the concrete. "Mom, the dog is back!" His mother's voice bellowed from inside the house. "Chadwick, stop playing with the neighbor's dog and go scrub the toilet. You're 49 years old." "I'm 50, Chad yelled back, tears of frustration evident in his eyes. The stream cut off abruptly as the chihuahua lunged for his ankle. I put down the iPad. I didn't laugh. I didn't smile. I just felt light. For years I had worried that I wasn't enough for Chad, that I was too old, too busy, too intimidating. But watching him fight a 3-pound dog in his mother's backyard, I realized the truth. I wasn't too much. He was just too little. "Are you going to watch it again?" Bernice asked, hitting the replay button. No, I said, standing up and walking to the edge of the balcony. I looked out over the sprawling lawn of my estate. It was beautiful, it was manicured, and it was incredibly lonely. The victory was complete. Chad was ruined. Tiffany was gone. I had my money, my company, and my pride. But I was also standing alone in a 10-bedroom house that echoed with the silence of a dead marriage. I turned back to Bernice. Call the real estate agent, Mother. Bernice looked up, surprised. You want to buy another investment property? No, I said, taking a deep breath of the jasmine-scented air. I want to sell this place, all of it, the furniture, the memories, the ghost of the woman I tried to be for him. And go where? Somewhere the air is cleaner. I smiled, a genuine smile this time. Somewhere I can drink wine without worrying if my husband is stealing the silver. I looked at the empty spot in the driveway where the G-Wagon used to be. I'm going to Napa, I declared. I think it's time I stopped planning events for other people and started planning a life for myself. 6 months later, the smog of Los Angeles felt like a distant, unpleasant memory, like a hangover from cheap wine. I sat on the veranda of my new estate in St. Helena, Napa Valley. The air here didn't smell of desperation and exhaust fumes. It smelled of crushed grapes, damp earth, and old money. My new home, a restored 19th-century farmhouse, was smaller than the Beverly Hills Mausoleum, but it had soul. And more importantly, it had a wine cellar that Chad didn't have the code to. In front of me lay a stack of freshly printed hardcovers. The title was embossed in gold foil, The Alpha Detox, How to Lose 180 Pounds of Dead Weight in One Night. It was a New York Times bestseller after just 2 weeks. You have a visitor, Bernice announced, walking onto the patio. My mother had taken to country life surprisingly well, mostly because the local bartenders made her martinis with artisan olives. It's that charming reporter from Vanity Fair. He wants to know if the chapter about the hydrovibrational water is satire or nonfiction. Send him in, I smiled, capping my Mont Blanc pen. The interview was effortless. I sat in my Eames lounge chair wearing a linen shirt and jeans, no more suffocating ball gowns, and told my story. Not as a victim, but as a victor. So, Miss Vance, the reporter asked, leaning in. Do you miss him? Do you miss the companionship? I looked out at the rows of Cabernet Sauvignon vines stretching toward the mountains. I miss the idea of him, I answered honestly. I miss having someone to carry the heavy boxes. But then I realized I can hire a very handsome man named Matteo to carry boxes for $20 an hour, and Matteo doesn't ask me to listen to his podcast about cryptocurrency. The reporter laughed. And what about the other woman, Tiffany? Oh, poor Tiffany, I sighed, pouring us both a glass of my private label vintage. She was just a symptom of the disease. You don't get mad at the sneeze, you treat the cold. I heard she's currently dating a DJ in Ibiza. I wish her well. She'll need a lot of energy drinks. After the reporter left, I took a walk through the vineyard. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of violet and burnt orange. My phone buzzed. It was a Google alert I hadn't bothered to turn off. Chadwick Miller files for bankruptcy. Claims hostile market conditions for failure of essential oil business. I stared at the notification. 6 months ago this would have made me angry. 3 months ago it would have made me laugh. Now, it made me feel nothing. Absolutely nothing. And that was the greatest freedom of all. Indifference. I deleted the alert. I deleted the search history. I put the phone in my pocket. I walked over to a vine, touched the rough bark, and plucked a single grape. It was tart, but with a promise of sweetness underneath. Victoria, Bernice yelled from the house. Matteo is here to fix the pool filter, and he took his shirt off. Come look, it's educational. I laughed, a real deep belly laugh that startled a flock of birds nearby. I'm coming, Mother, I shouted back. I wasn't looking for a new husband. I wasn't looking for a new drama. I was just looking for a good view, a good glass of wine, and a life that belonged entirely to me. But as I walked back toward the house, I saw a silver Aston Martin pulling up the long gravel driveway. It wasn't the reporter, and it certainly wasn't Chad. A man stepped out. He had silver hair, broad shoulders, and the kind of rugged elegance that makes 50-year-old boys look like toddlers. He held up a copy of my book. Excuse me, he called out, his voice rich and amused. I think you might have slandered my gender, and I'd like to discuss a rebuttal over dinner. I stopped. I smirked. The sequel was looking promising. The man leaning against the Aston Martin DB11 was named Elias Thorne. He was 64, a retired architect who had designed half the skylines in Dubai, and he was currently my new neighbor. "I read your book," Elias said, swirling the glass of Screaming Eagle Cabernet I had poured for him. We were sitting on my terrace, the twilight settling over the valley like a velvet blanket. Chapter 4. The part where your ex-husband tried to trademark the word moist. I laughed so hard I nearly choked on my espresso. "It wasn't a joke," I replied, smirking. "He thought it had brand potential." Elias chuckled, a deep, resonant sound that vibrated pleasantly in the cool air. "Well, Miss Vance, I must say, you are terrifying and entirely fascinating." "I prefer efficient," I corrected him. "I'm sure you do." He took a sip of wine. "I bought the vineyard to the north, Thorne Estate. I was told the previous owner of this place was a dragon lady who ate men for breakfast. I wanted to see if I needed to bring a shield." "Only if you try to sell me essential oils," I said. For the first time in decades, I felt a spark, not the frantic, insecure spark I felt with Chad, the need to please, to fix, to mother. This was a slow burn, the recognition of an equal. Elias didn't look at me and see an ATM or a mother figure. He saw a woman who had survived the fire and came out made of steel. "I'm hosting a dinner party next Saturday," Elias said, holding my gaze. "Just a few friends. Good wine, no PowerPoint presentations. I'd love for you to come." "I might be busy," I teased, though my calendar was wide open. "I'll take my chances," he smiled, setting his empty glass down. "Good night, Victoria." He walked back to his car with a confident stride. No swagger, no alpha posturing, just a man comfortable in his own skin. As the Aston Martin crunched down the gravel driveway, Bernice slid open the glass door. She was wearing a silk robe and holding a pair of binoculars. "He has good teeth," Bernice announced. "And he drives a car that costs more than my first 3 houses. Did you check his ring finger?" "Mother, please." I rolled my eyes, picking up my Kindle Oasis. "I checked," Bernice grinned. "Divorced 10 years, no kids. And he knows the difference between there, and there. Marry him, Victoria, or I will." I laughed and shook my head. I looked out at the darkness. The stars above Napa were brighter than they ever were in LA. I thought back to that morning in the G-Wagon. The morning I found the pill. The morning I thought my life was over. I had been so afraid of being replaced, of being old news. I realized now that the pill wasn't a tragedy. It was a catalyst. It was the universe grabbing me by the shoulders and shaking me awake. Chad had needed a plan B, because he lived his life by accident. He treated people like disposable objects and consequences like optional DLC. But me, I didn't need a plan B. I looked at my reflection in the glass door. 62 years old, wrinkles that told stories of laughter and stress, eyes that had seen betrayal and justice, a bank account that could buy a small island. I raised my glass to the moon. "Here's to Plan A," I whispered. Plan A was simple. Live well, drink good wine, tolerate no idiots, and never, ever let a man drive your car unless he knows how to handle the horsepower. I turned off the terrace light and walked inside. The house was warm. My mother was pouring herself a nightcap. The future was unwritten, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't planning the event. I was just enjoying the party. 1 year later, the sun hung low and heavy over the valley, casting a golden, magic hour light over the vines. It was Thanksgiving, but not the kind I used to host in Los Angeles. There were no caterers in black turtlenecks, no seating charts arranged by net worth, and definitely no ice sculptures. Instead, there was a long, rustic oak table set up right in the middle of the vineyard, under the twisting branches of the olive trees. I carried a steaming Le Creuset Dutch oven filled with braised lamb out to the table. Laughter drifted through the air, a sound that used to be so rare in my life, now as common as the breeze. Bernice sat at the head of the table, wearing a tiara she claimed was essential for digestion. She was currently teaching Elias how to play poker using grapes as chips. "I'm telling you, Elias," Bernice said, swirling her martini. "If you hold a pair of queens, you never fold. That's a life lesson, not just cards." Elias threw his head back and laughed. He looked over at me as I set the dish down. His eyes crinkled at the corners, lines carved by years of smiling, not frowning. He reached out and squeezed my hand. A simple, grounding touch. "Need help with the wine, Vic?" he asked. "I've got it." I smiled, uncorking a bottle of Vance Estate Reserve. I poured glasses for everyone. I looked around the table. There were friends from the local book club, my publisher, my mother, and Elias. No one was here because they wanted something from me. They were here because they wanted to be with me. I thought about the silence of my old life. I thought about the fear of being alone at 60. It seemed so silly now. My life wasn't empty. I had just been filling it with the wrong things. I raised my glass. To what? Elias asked, raising his. I looked at the golden hills, the food made with love, and the people who knew the real me, not the CEO, not the victim, just Victoria. To aging, I said softly, clinking my glass against his, because like the wine, we only get better with time. And the sour grapes, we left them on the vine to rot a long time ago. We drank. The wine was rich, complex, and lingered on the tongue. It tasted like peace.